I hope that you're enjoying today. I'm looking forward to this. I see some of you have already been in a few classes with each other. How many of you, this is your first time having an online class? Is this anybody had this is the first time your online class? Doesn't look like it. Looks like everybody has been in an online class before. That is awesome. Okay. Well, my name is Mrs. Filipek, and welcome to our biblical archaeology class. This is week 1, and we're just going to get started here today. I'm going to show you around our classroom. I'm going to show you a little bit, just kind of, we're going to do a little bit of review kind of stuff, and I'm going to show you what kind of things to, what we're going to be doing. If you have any questions, speak out. You can raise your hand up at the top. You see there's a little hand, raise your hand. I'll call on you. If you'd like to, ask a question on mic, make sure you just let me know and I'll, make sure your mic's on. You can do that. We'll take a moment to get to know each other here in a few minutes. And you can get on mic and camera if you'd like and tell us a little bit about yourself. If you would rather not, maybe you could just write a little bit about yourself in our chat box. And that way we can get to know you a little bit. Okay. My name is Mrs. Philipek, like I said. Let me show you my family here. This is my husband, and he is a music teacher in the public schools. He's been teaching. This week was his first day. Tuesday was his first day of his 31st year of teaching. And so he was kind of actually, yeah, it was, I think, yeah, 31 years he's been teaching. And I've been teaching for 36 years. On and off. Well, mostly on. Sometimes it's just been for like half a year. But I also taught. I'm adding in the years that I taught my own kids. I homeschooled for 22 years. So this is my oldest daughter, Autumn, and she is a teacher down in Florida. She teaches kindergarten, and she's been teaching for 8 years. This is my son, Wesley. He's had a security for the Toledo, Ohio Zoo. So that's kind of fun. I get excited. I always ask him questions like, what kind of fun things did the animals do? And he's got his favorites. He really loves the rhinoceros. He says he's like a giant puppy. And I just always laugh. And he says, when you go behind the scenes, he says the elephants behind the elephants exhibit. He says the elephants always like see him coming, and they like to throw dirt at him every time. And so he says there's a lot of funny things. He says like the Tasmanian devil never stops. He's always running around. And we came up across this thing where it said the first time, I think it was in the 19 or in 2007, I think it might have been, where they found out that Tasmanian devils are bioluminescent. And they said they first found out at the Toledo Zoo, and we laughed because he says they never are standing still. How you could tell? And he goes, I've never seen them standing still. So I know, I thought that was so cool. I never knew that. And I teach like marine biology where we learn a lot about bioluminescent animals. So that's fun. And then this is my daughter Ellie. She is a nurse in Pensacola, Florida, and she just got married this summer. And she let me know she got married actually at the end of spring, and she just let me know that I'm going to be a grandma soon. So I was like, oh wow. So now what do I call myself? Or what do I want my grandkids to call me? So I'm kind of getting excited about that. And my youngest daughter is Molly. She's studying to be a veterinarian. She works at 2 vet clinics, and she cracks me up. She is so active in so many different things, in Bible studies, and she rides in the rodeo, and she has horses, and she's just busy, and I just love it. I love, like, all my kids just do these amazing things, and I just think it's so much fun. And I think a lot of it comes from we homeschooled, and they all got to do things that they really love to do. And they all took a year off after college or after high school before they went to college to kind of figure out what they wanted to do and work in those fields a little bit. So that way they go, hey, that's really what I'd like to do. And I love that. I love that you guys have that opportunity here. And I love that you guys get to learn about God and the Bible during school. Um, one of my daughter's friends, my oldest daughter, she taught at the same school with my daughter Autumn, and she moved to a public school this year, and I've become friends with her through my daughter. And she was telling me, she's like, "I never realized how much I use the Bible in my teaching until I started going to a public school or teaching in a public school." She says, "I don't know how to really talk to the kids without putting God in there." And I told her, I said, "I know." I said, "I would not be able to teach a class without mentioning God or the Bible." And I hope that's, we're in a biblical archaeology class, and how cool is it that we're able to do this? And I find that quite amazing. Well, let me tell you a little bit about myself. Well, we'll go through some important announcements first, and I'm going to tell you about myself and give you a chance to tell about yourself too. So, some important announcements is make sure you have your books. I brought two of them today. I didn't even bring all my books. These are some of the books that you have. The archaeology book. This is one you're going to be doing your homework in this week. Unveiling the kings of Israel and unwrapping the pharaohs. And for some reason, I don't have my unwrapping the pharaohs book here with me. It's probably in my other room. But those are your three books. And sometimes we're going to be flipping back and forth between books. So it will be in your homework. And hopefully I have it nice and clear as to where you're supposed to be doing your work from. What's really cool is we're going to go to our class page. We'll take a look at that and you'll get to see how you do your homework. Your homework will be open book. Because you're going to be answering questions online and getting your answers from your book. So I think you can do it as many times as necessary. I'm not positive. There might be a limit to how many times you can do it. Put your questions in. But you could always look at all your questions, find the answers, and then go back in there. All right. So let's see. I don't have uh class hours or office hours. But if you ever would need to meet with me for any reason, just reach out to me and we'll find a time that works for both of us. And we can come into the classroom here and you can talk to me, ask me any questions, or if your parents have any questions, we can always meet together. Okay. So I don't have any class hours, but just message me and we can figure that one out. All right, let's get going here. Oh, here are 3 books right here. So make sure you have those. If you don't, how many of you do not have your books? Is there anyone who does not have your book? Looks like we're good. Okay. All right. I was gonna say, if you don't have your book, email me at the end of class and I will try to get it scanned for you and put it on our class page so you have the reading. And then it looks like everybody's good to go. All right. But I know we might have people coming in the last minute and because it's it's still August and we're starting school. I'm used to like September starting school, and it just seems like we're too early in this, summer here in the middle of August. And I know some of you start at home, some of you just do your online classes right now, and then you'll get ready with everything else later on. But um, yeah, I just feel like it's a little too early, but we'll be doing great here this week. All right. So our classes meet live on Thursdays at 3 o'clock for 90 minutes. And we do take a break in between class so that way you can get a chance to just kind of stretch or, you know, go get a drink or a snack or something. If you need to get a contact with me, use my email. There is a little like envelope button on our class page. Don't use that because it doesn't email me and let me know that I have a message until I come into class. So if you really want an answer right away, email me. That way you know that you'll get an answer because that'll go to my phone and I can answer you, or I can even let you know, hey, I'm busy right now. I'm out of, I'm busy for the day or I'm out of town and I'll get back to you as soon as I get back home, and I can answer your questions and let you know. So that way you're not forgotten. I did that one year. A student left me a note through the class page. I never saw it for like 3 weeks. And I felt so bad afterwards, and because they never said anything to me any other time. And then I felt bad, but always email me and it'll go right to my phone too. Okay. Make sure that you try to come to class as often as possible. If not, we do have a recording at the end of the day. Usually within 10 minutes after class, I get the recording up. Unless there's some sort of technical issue that I have to deal with, I can usually get it right up after class, like within a couple minutes. So it's usually up there right away. If you are in class though, be present. Okay, not just try to make class and be there, but be present in class, whether you're watching the recording or whether you're here, meaning focus. Don't, and I'm terrible. I got my phone here. I just because I was checking messages in between my classes, and don't have another screen up and open on your computer. Try to focus in on class. I know an hour and a half is a long time sometimes. I know sometimes, sometimes an hour and a half goes by really fast. Sometimes you can watch a movie or you can listen to a great speaker, and an hour and a half is just like, phew, it's fast. And sometimes it is painfully slow. Okay. I have sat through times, I've been in church sometimes where the pastor just is not very exciting that day or not speaking on anything that that is just clicking with me. And I mean, my mind's everywhere but where it should be. And and sometimes our days are like that. Find some way to focus. And I usually have notes for you to take, or you can take notes in class that will help you have your books there, in case that you have questions, but try to focus in on class. I know that sometimes that's hard today in a digital age where things are coming at us constantly. And I try to make class as exciting as possible. And sometimes I fail at that miserably, but sometimes I do pretty well. And I hope I do. I hope I can make class interesting for you. All right. So, kind of like being present here, be responsible for doing your homework or whatever assignment that we have. And also be responsible for your behavior. Be respectful, not only in class by making sure chat is respectful. Be respectful of each other. Okay, making sure that our speech and our conduct is right. Okay, if you're start going off here on our chat, I might clear the chat. And sometimes I can even have the ability to boot you out of class, and hopefully I won't have that problem with anybody. I've never had to do that, but I just always tell everybody, make sure that you're respectful of everyone. Okay, in an emergency, and this has only happened twice in my 13 years of teaching online. Um, if for some reason I get kicked out or I can't log in, just wait 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes, if I can't get in there, just leave and I will make a recording as soon as possible and I will put it up and I will let you know that it's up there on the class page for that. So it's only happened twice in the last 13 years that and so I usually don't ever expect that to happen. Once was the very first day and everybody stayed in class and waited for me. And after about 15 minutes, I was able to get back on there again. And the other time happened during an ice storm and we lost power and I just couldn't log on. So somebody else messaged all the students and told them that I wouldn't make it for that day. But that's the only time that's ever happened. So let me see if I can get this right. There we go. All right. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I live in rural Michigan. Living out in the country is one of my favorite things to do. I live in an area that's a dark sky preserve. So this is what the United States looks like at night. I live in an area where there's no bright lights for at least 15 miles around. So we've got really dark skies. So we walk outside and you can see the stars right away, which is really just an amazing thing. And maybe you live in an area like that. It is just awesome if you do. I love to look at the stars. My husband just built a deck on our for our back of our house this summer, and he put out a lawn chair for me so I can sit out there and I can look at the stars, and I love it. I am just so excited about that. I also spend a Oh, you do? Oh my goodness. So you can't see anything at night, so that's no fun. I love going outside and seeing the Milky Way. Watching this past week, we had meteor showers, so I was watching those, and it's just so much fun. Earlier in the summer, we got to see the auroras, and it was so cool. Oh, it just gives me chill bumps even thinking about it. It was just so neat. I've always wanted to see them really well, and they were just amazing. And I missed them last year. Last year they were up here and they were so bright. My friends were sending me pictures. I was down in Florida at my daughter's graduation, and they said, "You, I wish you were here because I teach astronomy classes." And they were like, "You missed it." And they were sending me live pictures, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I missed all of this." And so I love when I can go out there and see that. And I actually have an app on my phone that tells me when the auroras are visible at night because, I don't wanna miss it. I've got lots of astronomy apps, so that's a lot of fun. Yes, so that's really neat. So if you wanna get there's some really cool apps that'll tell you, like, when there's certain like the International Space Station, when it's gonna be above your head, and there's an app that will tell you when there's gonna be auroras available. So I love science, and so that's really cool. Okay, so let me ask you guys where you're from because it's always nice to see where everybody's from. Over on the left, you should be able to see some tools, and there's a pencil. You can use that to kind of make a star or something where you're at, circle where you're at, and we can see where everybody's at. Um, I know that we've got students from all over, and it's just kind of neat to be able to see where everybody's from. I see we have let me see, we've got Maeve, you in New Hampshire. I grew up in Connecticut, so that's kinda cool. Can you guys see the tools over to the left? You can pick up the pencil and you can draw on the slide and show us where you're at. Ah, there we go. I see somebody working there. All right. Give you guys a chance to do that. And you're in Illinois, so I saw where you're from there. All right, awesome. I see. Okay, so Renee, you're in Georgia. I see that. In West Virginia. And Jenna. Let's see if you can put a you don't have the pencil? Okay. Do you see it over here on the left? You just use your mouse to touch that? Oh, no, you don't? Okay, some of the students the other day, some of the students could see it and some of them couldn't. Okay, so we'll have to check on that one. Okay. Sometimes they can see it, sometimes they can't. Okay, so you're in, oh, you're on your phone. Okay. All right. That would make it that would help me understand that. Yes. Okay. All right. So you live in Hawaii. All right. Wow. That's pretty cool. That's one place I'd like to visit sometime. And the reason I want to visit is the black sand. I really want to see the black sands on some of the islands. I think that would be so cool. That is so neat. Wow, isn't it amazing? How many hours behind are you? So it's 3 o'clock here. What are you, 5 hours behind? If I'm doing my math right. It's 9 a.m. Okay, so that's 6 hours. Wow. So wow, that's awesome. Wow, isn't it cool how we could all be in different time zones and get together and meet? That is just amazing to me. That is I still just overwhelmed with that. All right, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am a ceramicist also. I love to teach sciences. I love all the different sciences. I started teaching science years ago. And when my kids were homeschooled, I really got into teaching the local homeschool science groups. And then I started teaching. I have a co-op that I run, and I teach all the high school sciences. And then I've been teaching online for a different places and teaching science classes. And this year, biblical archaeology, which is kind of a science too, and it's pretty cool. And I am a ceramicist where I love to do pottery. I've been doing that for about 6 years, and we took one of my chicken coops and turned it into a pottery shed for me. And so today is actually a beautiful day. I might go out there tonight and work on some pottery because I have a show coming up soon. So I want to have a few pieces done for that. We love our animals here. We've lived on a couple acres out in the country for about the past 30 years, and I absolutely love it. I was a little nervous at first because grew up in the city, and so my husband grew up raising baby raccoons, that were orphaned, and so we ended up over the years, we've taken in lots of little raccoons that have lost their moms. And the hardest ones were when we had triplets. Those were really hard because they depended on each other, and it was hard for them to learn because they were too busy fighting and playing with each other. And when you had a single raccoon or even twins, they were more likely to follow you and listen to you. And so we would raise the baby raccoons, and we raise horses. We have horses. These are three of the horses we have. This is Bucky and this is Jasper. They're minis. They are hilarious. And I'll tell you, if you know horses, the smaller they are, the meaner they are, but they can be funny. I wouldn't be around them too much when it comes to food because they're very food oriented, or motivated, I should say. And if I go out there to work on the fence or anything, you have a mini. Oh, aren't they? They're hilarious, but they can also be really mean. But the Bucky, she just loves when I go outside and I'm working on the fence and I have a water bottle with me. She will grab it and she'll take off and she will fling it around in her face and just tries to, you know, get something out of it. She knows I go drinking out of it, but she can't figure out how to get anything out of it. But yeah, lives out, meaning lives out with the cows. They think that they're in charge. And poor Star, she was our oldest one. She's blind in both of her eyes, and so she depends on them to lead her around. But they'll steal her food. She's horrible. We have to feed them all separately so they can all eat. And then we have one more named Jessie. She is a roan Appaloosa that we just got, and she's staying at a horse farm about a mile down the road. And my daughter is teaching her how to barrel race, so that's why she's over there, so she has some room to actually run and race. And we've my kids have all been involved in 4-H. How many of you have been in 4-H? I was a 4-H mom, so we raised chickens and turkeys, cows. We never did pigs because I can't stand the smell of pigs, but I can take everything else. So they did everything. They even brought their horses to the fair. So they were busy with that kind of stuff. So that made mom busy with all those kinds of stuff. We have a couple parrots, and in fact, the black faced one is a conure, and her name is Bosco, and Bosco is 36 years old, so she can live to be 50, and so we've had her around for quite some time, and she's kind of funny. She tries to talk, but she doesn't have the right like tongue to actually form words really well, but she can say like hello and I love you and what's up. But it's really, it's not always clear, but she laughs. If I laugh and I'm in the other room, I have a very loud laugh. And if I laugh and I'm in the other room, all of a sudden I'll hear her go, ha 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 ha. She's over there laughing at me. And so I think she mocks me. We have a couple dogs. Pete was just out there barking just a few minutes ago. They're both Shih Tzus. So I've got Pete and I have Gus. Gus is my little baby. He is a lover. Oh my goodness. He likes to sit on my lap and just be the center of attention all the time. So he's a lot of fun. And then we have another dog, Tucker. He's an Australian Shepherd. And that's my daughter's dog, which he's a little bit bigger. So he likes to rough house with them and play with them. And then we have lots of barn cats. They like to come in the house and visit, but we've got lots of animals. So that's kind of fun. And I love to read and do my pottery and different things like that. So it just keeps us busy and keeps me busy. In fact, I just messaged my husband and told him to pick up some library books for me. So they're waiting for me at the desk. They know me there. I just walk on in and they hand me the book. They know me by name. I don't even have to. I don't think I've even used my library card in like 15 years. I just walk in and they give them to me. But it's just kind of fun. All right, I'm going to give you guys a chance to tell me a little bit about yourself. Let me oh, oops, no, that's not what I wanted to do. Let me hit select all and do microphone and video. If you want to come on, you can. You don't have to. You can write in the chat if you'd like, but I do have your microphone and video on so you can come on and tell us a little bit about yourself. And is there anyone who would like to go first? Let me see. Do we have just We have all girls in this class, don't we? That's kind of nice. I have never had a class of just all girls. I have had a class of all boys. Anybody wanna come on? If you want, you can just type something in the chat. Okay, Savannah, why don't you come on on? Okay, I can see your oh, there, I think you turned it off. There you go. Oh, it's not connected. Okay. Thought I heard something for a second. Okay, anybody else wanna go on? Okay, Renee?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I am 17. I'm a senior and I'm from Georgia. I live like 45 minutes from Atlanta. And I have four siblings, two brothers and two sisters, and I have three dogs, two miniature Australian shepherds, and one border collie. And I cannot name a favorite book because I have a lot. And then um, unusual talent. I am an aerialist. I do like the lyra, the trapeze, aerial silks. So that's me.
That is awesome. Wow. I always think that those would be so much fun. Um, that is kinda scary, but it would look like it would be fun to do. I'm a little afraid of heights, but anybody else? Looks like everybody's shy. That's okay. I see that some of you wrote down some stuff, oh, Marissa, you'll go. Very good. Okay. I see everyone who wrote in our discussion. I think almost everyone wrote in the discussion. And I'm not hard on discussion questions. I think it's really cool. And so I got to see some of you and your answers there, and that was really neat to be able to see. All right. So if you click the microphone button up at the top, it should turn your microphone on. When you log on in class, you can always check your microphone to see if it works. And if you have a headset, if your speakers work, I think you probably saw that when you jumped on in. And if you have a video camera, you can see. Okay, Savannah, you want to try to go on?
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm used to my laptop, but I moved just yesterday to a desktop that I paid for myself. So I did not have a microphone on that built in, so I had to go grab my desk mic.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, you can. So that was something in my life. I made my most expensive purchase in my life. I built a PC for my brother.
Awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, I am 17 and a senior, just like Renee. Um, I I live on a farm and I work on a farm, but not the same farm. I my some my farm that I live on is beef cattle, but because all of my brothers they don't need me, so I work at a dairy farm and I milk cows.
How cool. That is awesome.
It's It is quite the experience because sometimes I have to work in the morning sometimes. I worked this morning and I have been up till 4 AM.
Yes, definitely.
And
That's an early morning.
yeah, I feed calves and stuff. That's part of my job. There's 2 girls that work in there usually, me and someone else, just changes up. And, while one after a while, one will stay and milk and the other will go feed calves. Usually, I'm the one going to feed the calves. You would think we starved them.
That is so cool. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Well, that is
Um,
awesome.
and if I had a camera, I do not have a camera because I'm on a new computer, but if I had a camera on, you would see I have a milk jug on my desk because I
That
was
is great.
thirsty and did not feel like getting a cup.
Oh, I love it. That is
All right.
great.
I'm gonna
Oh,
turn this off.
well, wonderful. Okay. Anybody else want to come on? I see Marissa said she has 3 siblings and you have 4 dogs and a cat. That's pretty awesome. All right. Anybody else? Okay, Jenna. See if you got that. Oh, I think we lost her. Oh, okay. Oh, there you are. Okay, you're back again.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm 14. I'm a freshman in high school, and I have a sister, 2 sisters, a brother, a niece, and a nephew.
Oh, awesome.
And for hobbies, I do acting, art. I love reading and writing books. And I like to really do anything that has to do with the ocean. I do free diving, surfing, scuba diving.
How fun. That is awesome. I love the beach. I think that's one of
Yeah.
my favorite things to do is I love to go swimming and I love to walk on the beach, and my husband is deathly afraid that there's gonna be sharks in the water, so he's always walking up and down the beach just scanning for sharks.
There was a tiger shark at the beach we lived next to yesterday.
Oh, so cool. But,
Yeah.
yeah, you don't wanna be in the water,
No.
but it's fun to look, yeah, from a distance. That is so neat. Oh, that is awesome.
So that's it.
Okay, well, thank you. All right, well, thank you, ladies. That was great. Oh, it's so much fun to learn about everybody, and hopefully, you guys can be friends and get to know more about each other. All right, we're going to start off with a word of prayer, and typically, I'll give you a chance to write down any prayer requests that you might have, and we'll take time to pray for each other. So, if you have any prayer requests, you can put that in the chat. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to tell you while I'm waiting for that. Um, I can't think of anything. So, um, okay, so we can pray for that. Savannah, anybody else? What I'll do is I'll start with a word of prayer and then I'll look and see if there's any prayer requests up there. Dear Lord, I thank you so much for today. And I ask that you just give us a good year as we begin. I just pray that you would help each one of us as we go about our school day. Some of us are working and some of us are taking classes here, home, or maybe just in a local area. And I pray that you would help us to do our very best in all that we do. And I pray that you would just help each one of us to have a servant's heart and to find some way to be a blessing to those around us. We also ask that you be with Savannah with this little calf that she's working with, that you would help that poor little thing to feel better, and I pray that you would just watch over us today. I ask that you just be with our class, help us to focus and to learn a lot of interesting things, and to really be help this class to be a blessing to each one of us. We pray these things in your name. Amen. Okay, so let's see. Let me ask you this question as we begin. What role does a scientist's Christian belief have in his work? And if you'd like to come on mic, you can. But think about that. What role does a scientist's Christian belief have in his work? Sure, Savannah.
Y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So a Christian worldview in science helps because it's tempting to think that science and Christianity oppose each other. They actually work together. Like if a Christian knows the Bible really well, they know that um, there are things described in the Bible scientifically. There's something, I think it was like a circle or something that was just like how it worked was described in the Bible actually wasn't discovered for hundreds of years later. And if you know that that science helps us see how God's design works with science. I'm word salad. Uh,
No, that's perfect. That is exactly what we're
uh,
looking for.
and if when a scientist looks at a Christian scientist looks at something, not a Christian science as the religion, a Christian scientist, whatever. What am I saying? Um, uh, um, they can look closer at their work and they can use their work to see the beauty of God's creation from every angle.
Very good. Yes, that's exactly what we're looking for. Is that as a scientist, you either have a Christian worldview or your biblical worldview, or like an evolutionary worldview. So your ideas of where things came from are going to be completely different. Your timeline of where things come from is completely different. And your belief of everything is going to be different because one believes in God and the other does not. And so our beliefs really have an important view in our work and our daily life. Your daily life, the decisions you make are based on your faith. You think about it, you know your 10 commandments and you know what's right and wrong. And so the decisions you base are based on things that are right and wrong. And the Holy Spirit guides you, or even, nudges you when you've done, ever done something wrong and you feel guilty about it. And a person who does not know the Lord, they don't have that nudging of the Holy Spirit. They don't have a compass of what's right and wrong. And so what's right to them is how they view their life. They'll do what's ever right for them. And so our views, our biblical views, are very important in every aspect of our life, especially as a scientist. There are a lot of Christian scientists out there, and there have been in the past, and it makes a difference in how they see God's creation. And that is really important. So when we take a look at the days of creation, God created the sun, moon, and stars on day 4. Okay. Day 1, God created light and dark. On day 2, God created the sky or the atmosphere and the waters, and God separated the waters. Now, there's different types of waters. What kind of waters are there? Think about the type of water. All right, fresh and salt water. Good. And so that God separated those waters. And even in oceans, there are rivers within the oceans, and oceans that meet, there's a good separation line. And on day 3, we see that the dry land was created and all the vegetation. And the Bible doesn't list every specific kind. I can look out my yard and I can see at least, maybe I would say at least 500 different types of vegetation, between different types of grasses and weeds and flowers and trees. There's just all different kinds of things in my yard. Okay. If you look outside your yard, you could probably find at least 10, 15, 20 different types of vegetation growing. God did not have to list every single type. All right. And God didn't list everything, but he told us what he created on which day. On day 4, God created the sun, moon, and stars, and he created everything else out in space. This was when all of the different planets, when we take a look at the planets at night, it looks like a star to us. But God didn't have to say, oh, I created the planets, I created universes and galaxies and all this other stuff. He tells us everything that was out in space. Okay, so I made the sun, the moon, and everything else out in space. On day 5, God created all the flying creatures, and God didn't have to list all the flying creatures, but there are all sorts of birds, bats, bumblebees, dragonflies, different things like that are flying. And then all the water creatures. So that could be your fish, your whales, your dolphins, your lobsters and crabs, just everything that's in the water, whether it's microscopic or macroscopic. Okay. Micro meaning small, macro meaning large. Okay. 6 days, on the day 6, God created all the land animals, from the largest to the smallest, to your tiny one-celled creatures, into your burrowing little worms and snakes and slithery things and spiders and flies, and then all your big elephants and giraffe and everything else. I've been watching this. I love animal videos, and I've been watching this one on this little pygmy hippo. Maybe you've seen this, Max, and or Mars. I'm sorry, Mars. And they're trying to teach him to go into his cage at night, and he's just a little tiny fat pygmy hippo, and I just absolutely love him. And so you think about all the different animals that God created. He didn't list them all, but all of these things God just spoke, and they came into existence. But with man, God created him special. God built him out of the dust of the ground and breathed into him the breath of life. And what's so cool is, when someone dies, their body decays, it becomes the same thing that's made out of the dirt. It's the same ingredients that's the dirt. Isn't that cool? That is so cool. I think that is just so neat. God made us out of mud. He made a mud man, and made Adam, and he breathed into him the breath of life, and he became a living soul, a living creature made in God's image. Everything else, God just spoke into existence. With man, he took extra special time, because we are special. We are made with a body, a soul, and a spirit. And so we are very special. All right. Now, I love this quote: the more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know. Albert Einstein. And hopefully you'll realize in class that the more you learn, the more you don't know. And you're just learning, like, maybe you remembered in, first grade, you started learning how to add, and then you started learning more and more and more as you started going on. And you realize, maybe you were really good at it right away, and then it got harder and harder and harder as you go on. And still now, even some of the things that we're going to be learning, I tell my students that it's kind of like a cupcake. And you think about those really fancy ones. You ever watch one of those TV shows where they make these really fancy desserts, or go into a really fancy bakery and they're just like loaded with all sorts of goodies, and you just take your tongue and just taste, just like lick the frosting, and that's all you're getting right now. And there's so much more to learn, and we never know it all. And so that's one of the things you're going to learn. Okay, so we're going to take a break right here. And here we go. Okay, so when we look into biblical archaeology. We can look into history to help us. And one of the best books to look into is the Bible. But there's also other different things that we can look into. We can look at geological evidence like rocks and fossils, and even look into the different areas, physical locations that the Bible has given us. And there are actually other books that, like historical books that were written by kings like Ashurbanipal, the king Ashurbanipal, that's mentioned in the book of Jonah. And we can see that these places were real places, and that these different areas kept records of what was going on around the world. And so they also keep record of what was happening that's written in the Bible. And so it's really neat to be able to see that these things coincide. Now, there's two ways of looking into the past of where we came from. There's uniformitarianism and catastrophism. Okay, so uniformitarianism, this is what most scientists look at. And they say that our Earth is billions of years old, like 14.5 billion years old. And they say that because they say that it should have taken about 14.5 billion years for all the different structures on the Earth to have formed, like places like the Grand Canyon. Okay, well, those places I'd love to go, but basically they say it would have taken that many years for the Colorado River to have worn down over the years all those different layers. Okay, so everything gradually happened like it happens today. So things would have changed very, very slowly. But the problem is we see things happen very quickly. Okay, if you think about the Grand Canyon and the Colorado River, if the Colorado River would have worn out the Grand Canyon, where is all the debris from that? Where did it go? It's not at the end of the Colorado River. You wouldn't have billions and billions of piles of rock and sand and debris at the end of that. So where did it all go? Okay. A few years ago, in I shouldn't say just a few years ago, in 1980, um, Mount St. Helens erupted in Washington state. And when it erupted, within 6 days, they were able to see, after all the ash had settled, that like a mini Grand Canyon was formed in just those few hours. And when all the dust settled, there was a new river that was formed, and there was a new canyon that was formed that is very deep and has lots and lots of different layers, just like the Grand Canyon. Now, that would be catastrophism, that catastrophes change the formations of the world. So, a catastrophe is something that happens very suddenly. And as this happens, it changes the geological features, like an earthquake, a volcano, a hurricane, and the worldwide flood. Okay, Noah's flood would have God's flood from Noah and the ark would have changed the dynamics of the entire world very, very quickly. So you got to look at what the Bible has to say. In Genesis 1, chapters 1 through or verses 1 through 31, it talks about God's initial design for everything. And then in chapter 3, we see that sin entered into the world. And what happened when sin entered into the world? What was one of the things that happened when sin entered into the world? Does anyone remember from those Bible verses? There's all sorts of things. So maybe you can think of one. Okay. So the ground was cursed. Yeah. So now there's thorns and weeds. Okay. Things that we don't want growing. And maybe they had a different purpose before, but and sometimes we're finding out that weeds do have a purpose today. And I find them in my yard and I think of them as a weed. And some herbalists will say, oh, this is good for migraines, or this is good for a wart, you know, and they'll say, that they're good for something. And here I am pulling them out of my flower patch. And so we see that death entered into the world also. And there is a consequence for sin. And in Romans 6:23, it tells us that the consequence for sin, we're born now with sin in our hearts. Once sin entered in the world, everyone was born with sin into our hearts. And when sin entered into the world, we all have to pay that price, and that price is death. But there's a gift of God, which is eternal life, and that's by asking the Jesus into your heart. So how did we get there? Okay, so the secular thought for where we are today was that humans evolved over millions of years. That at first there was a big bang that caused all the planets and stars and the galaxies and in our universe, and that eventually, that after the earth was formed, that eventually there was one cell that appeared, and eventually that one cell grew into like all the different animals and plants that we have today. And I was listening to our local there's a Christian radio station, and there's a radio host, and he is a creationist, and he talks a lot about different things in creation. And he said something a couple weeks ago, and I thought, I've never thought about it this way. But he said, he goes, "Did you ever think that not only does evolution say that all things were like eventually created, through, they were morphed, from some chemical process, but there was a male and female of each one, and each one of them have different organs. Females have different organs than males, and even the body, sometimes the body shape is just slightly different. Like our hip bones are made a little bit different than males. And you think about male and female of humans, we're built differently. We have different organs, but our bones are shaped different. Our For ladies, you're more like softer, where men are more muscular. And so we see that there's differences between male and female. And I never thought, yeah, where did they say, there's a male and female of every one? And so, it had to be perfect. And even the eyes, if the eyes were just not perfect, that there would be some issues with evolution. So there's so many issues with evolution. But they said that human skills started occurring about 10,000 to 20,000 years ago, and the first civilization was about 5,500 years ago, which was the Egyptians civilization. And this is where we have records. Now, the biblical thought was that creation happened about 6,000 years ago. We say 6 to 10,000 because there's a few years that might be missing, but not very many. So we're closer to 6,000. And the flood happened approximately 4,300 years ago. And Noah and his family were the only survivors. We can go back in time, and there are actually DNA evidences of certain groups having quite a few similarities in their DNA. And they said they can go back in time and trace back to when people can go back into Noah and his sons. And I think that is so cool that we can look at that today and that DNA evidence. So Noah's heritage, we see his Noah was the grandson, Mizraim, and he was the father of the Egyptians. His grandson was the father of the Egyptians. And this civilization we can go back in time, and we can actually see their their civilization. We can see their history with the different like mummies and the hieroglyphics and the tombs and everything else. And so there's both secular and biblical views of those, and they both acknowledge that Egypt is the oldest civilization. The timeline might be slightly off. Notice how the world says that their civilization was about 5,500 years, and that's when you go back and you take a look at some of the oldest artifacts, they're only about 5,000 years old. I've been to several museums, and those are like the oldest artifacts. So those artifacts are dated by using different types of dating methods. Some of them are good, and a lot of them don't work very well. And so we can see the differences, and we can actually list what kind of differences work, and which ones work well and which ones don't, and why. And then Noah's three sons were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And so those were his three sons and their wives, and they were the ones that survived. Now, the descendants of Ham were Cush, which are the Nubians, which is present day Sudan. Okay, so if you're familiar with that type of area, I'm not very familiar with all those different places, but if you look on a map, that would be where Sudan is. And Mizraim was where the Egyptians were. And Put was probably the Ethiopians or the Libyans. And then Canaan was his group was the Canaanites. And they're where Palestine is. And if you listen to the news, you hear a lot about Palestine today. So Palestine and Israel are fighting, and they have been fighting for many, many years. Okay. I mean, not just like 15, 20, but thousands of years. And the Bible tells us that they would always be fighting. So, how do we know so much about Egyptian history? Okay. I always find Egyptian history really fascinating. I love to learn about Egyptian history. And so this class is pretty cool. There's so many different new videos coming out. You guys watch the video about some of the top 10 things that we have found. And if you didn't finish watching that video and writing about that, just make sure you get a chance to do that this week. It is. I think my favorite part was when they found the little tiny inkwell, which was clay, because I make pottery, and pottery is so fragile, but it doesn't like decay like iron will rust and eventually turn to dust. So yeah, there's a lot of really interesting things there. But we have a lot of ancient historians that would write things, and so this is why we know so much about history. So Herodotus, Manetho, Josephus, there's the annals of Josephus, that will give you all the different history that was going on during that time. And he lived during the time of Jesus. So he even writes about what happened during that time. And he's a noted historian. And so we see that, here we have a couple different people here that are great historians. And then we have archaeological discoveries. There's scribes, and there's hieroglyphs. There's temple walls that are full of information, and all these different relics not only teach us about Egyptian history, but also about biblical history. And so we're finding out so much about it. And I'm going to tell you, this summer when I was studying a lot of this, because I'm taking this class over from someone else, I learned so much. I was like, "Oh my goodness, I knew this, but I didn't know why I knew this." And so I learned, and then there was things that I didn't know, and I was like, "This is so cool." So I've been learning along with you guys, and I've been having so much fun. So Herodotus is considered the father of history. So he had in Greece around 550 to 479 BC. Remember, the time goes backwards there, okay? Because this is before Christ. He had a lot of history from Western Asia and Europe at this time, and so he's not in the Bible, but his history shows us that the first books of the Bible are true, he puts there the timelines go together. And so he collected historical information by sailing through the Black Sea and the Danube River. And he also documented oral histories and wrote books about the places that he visited. So that I thought was really neat. Then we have the pyramids and mummies. And there are three great pyramids and Giza right out of, or the pyramids of Giza that are right outside Cairo, Egypt. Now, if you take a look at them, we look at these pictures and we see, oh, this is the pyramid, and this is so cool, and we look at it. But if you look at it from a view out, you can see that you've got this major city, and then all of a sudden you've got desert area, and you've got these pyramids right there, not too far from the city. And it just always amazed me, because I was like, oh, this has to be desert everywhere. And these have to be really far out in the desert, but they're right near like a modern day city. And so we can see that there were different kings of the dynasties that has built these. And there are smaller ones that have been eroded over time because they weren't built very well, and they've fallen apart due to sandstorms or different flaws in the structure. And so they're not always as visible. But there's three that are really, really huge, like we see here. So the largest one was built for King Khufu, and his Greek names was Cheops. And this was anywhere from 2,300,000 to 3 million stones. And each one of them weighed about 30 tons. Can you imagine that? How did they move that? So, a lot of people over the years, I've heard people say, well, it had to be aliens that made these things because people didn't have that technology. And all of them are put together. Like there's like the exact the same distance in between each of the spaces. They're just so exact, and the sides of them were so smooth. And now we're seeing some of them falling apart due to age and everything. But how did they build that without modern day equipment? And so there were a lot of people, yeah, they had a lot of math to do, and they figured these things out. People were not dumb. They were extremely intelligent. Adam and Eve were extremely intelligent. When God made Adam, he was very intelligent. When you start reading the Bible, within just a few years, you have people who are doing metal smithing. And we have people that were doing all sorts of amazing things that we're learning how to do here in the United States that were been done for thousands and thousands of years. And it's really neat things. So a lot of people are like, how in the world did those get built? I think over time that we have lost our intelligence, especially like some of you like to read really well. If you go back and you read like an English poetry or English literature, some of that, with all the these and thous, and, it's all very hard to understand. We don't talk like that, but, that's how they talked. And now we're kind of, I want to say dumbing down, but we're not as intelligent as some of these previous generations were. And so here we have these beautiful temples that were built, and pyramids. And then we see the Egyptian religion. They worship many gods. There were all sorts of different gods that they worshiped. Two of them, one of them was Ka, and Ka would eat the food that was prepared for either the person that died. They would set out food. Okay, so when we have our rulers, the pharaohs, they would mummify their bodies, and they would fill up those tombs with different artifacts, things that they were going to take into the next life with them, into the afterlife with them. And one of those was food. And then Ba, who could leave the tomb and travel during the day but would return at night. So those were a couple of the gods that they had. So Ba needed to have the body preserved or embalmed, and then the king had to be their body needed to be protected. So they had to have. Sometimes they would bury servants with them. They would bury all of their treasures with them. So this is why we had a lot of tomb raiders taking a lot of the treasures over the years. But we also had these big pyramids that would protect them and protect them in the afterlife. I love watching some of these videos where they show them going into some of these tombs for the very first time in maybe years, many many years. Sometimes they're the very first ones to go into them and seeing what's left behind. So during the time where they would bury the royalty, a lot of time they would use baskets or reed type coffins made out of, like a typical basket material that you would think of. Or sometimes they would have stone coffins, which we would call the sarcophagus. And so they would put especially when we are looking at your pharaohs or anyone very important, they would mummify the body and put them inside these sarcophagus. And we start seeing their embalming process. I was just talking to my last class, my anatomy and physiology class, about embalming, and the Egyptians were so good at embalming that we still have not quite been able to figure out their recipe of how they embalmed to make everything so perfect. But basically, they would use a hook that would go through the nose, and it would pull out the brain in little chunks. You remove that. The organs were removed, except for the heart. That's so cool. Okay, I love that. I haven't seen that. And they would prepare or dry the organs and put them in special conical jars. And the body would be dried using, we know that they would use some type of a salt for about 70 days, and they would remove all the moisture from the body. Then they would use different things to stuff the inside of the body to keep the shape. And they would use oils and herbs and spices to put on the body. And then they would wrap the body in linens, and then they would put some sort of resin or oil on top of that bandage to kind of keep everything preserved. and then they would put it inside of the sarcophagus, and then everything, then he would be buried. But you think about the time period of burying, the making the tombs to begin with, these giant pyramids, and then the time it took to go through all these processes and get them buried. It was quite an ordeal. Now, Herodotus was a Greek traveler, and he traveled and he wrote about this embalming process. He's considered one of the founders of history, and so it's kind of neat that he was able to write things down, but we still don't know everything about it because we're still trying to figure all that out. Now, mummies were actually found in the Bible. So Jacob, after he died, was mummified. And he remembered Jacob was brought to Egypt by his son Joseph. Okay. And we see in that in Genesis 50, verses 2 and 3. Now, the Egyptians also mummified some of their pets. And so they would mummify like birds and monkeys, cats. The cat was really prized as a kind of like a god in their time. And I love cats. Cats are so cool, but they kind of choose you. You know how they're kind of snooty sometimes. If they don't like you, they're not going to go to you. But so they were considered somewhat of a god back then. And so most human mummies have been destroyed over time, maybe being in the elements or something like that. So sometimes when we find them, we have to be careful of the type of lights that we use with them and different things like that. But over time, there were grave robbers that would come in and take all the treasures that were there. And sometimes they would even destroy the bodies. Sometimes they would take them. Sometimes they were actually used, this is gross, they were used as medicine. The mummies were used as medicine or sometimes fertilizer, and sometimes firewood, depending on the need that was there. But I can't imagine using them as medicine. That's just gross. All right, so then we have the dynasties. We have the dynasties typically went from the king would be the father, and then the next king or pharaoh would be the son. Now, as we're going to be studying this in class, we're going to realize that sometimes there were dynasties that all happened at the same time. So, like they'll say like the fifth dynasty, the sixth dynasty. Some of them all happened at the same time because Egypt is long and skinny, and so sometimes there were 2 or 3 pharaohs at the same time. So this is why we can see different dynasties happening all at the same time. So the first and second dynasties were buried in mastabas, which meant bench. And although no bodies have been found, we know that they're from writing that this is how they were buried. Now, the Egypt, when we take a look at the Egypt, we also know that they were very intellectual people. And there is writings from over 200 different people groups around the world, over 200. And more, we have more that are oral reports that have been passed down of the flood. And so in Egypt, we have evidence of the flood in sometimes like in little toys that they had. And that's pretty cool when you think about that. Now, when we take a look at the first dynasty, we have King Menes or King Marner, and we see that he was the grandson of Noah. So we can see that some of the timeline runs right with the history of the Bible. So that's pretty cool when you start looking at that. So when we talk about archaeology, archaeology is when we study the things that are in the ground. Okay, not paleontology. Paleontology is when we're studying like dinosaurs, but we got archaeology. We're studying not the history through physical remains. Okay, so we study humans through maybe pottery or different types of houses or anything that we can find. We try to understand the culture. We try to understand, maybe the types of foods that they ate, where they lived, how they worked, how they lived. So this is where we get a lot of our history. Okay, so when we take a look at the key aspects of archaeology, we take a look at the material remains. So anything that was left over in the past, and a lot of it can be garbage that's buried. Okay, some of you said you lived on farms. We live on an old farm here in Michigan, And we have dug up old wells that they filled up with garbage, glass bottles and everything else. And it's pretty cool to go through that and look at the past. Broken dishes were buried. And our horse pasture, every summer or spring, I have to go out there. Well, I usually do it. My son and my daughter would come with me, and we'd go out in the back and we'd see what popped up out of the ground during the winter, because ground, as it freezes and thaws, expands and contracts. So it's going back and forth as it's thawing and freezing, and it pushes up anything that's unnatural. So what comes up is, could be like old car parts. It was one year we went out there was a whole fender of a car, and we're like, how in the world did this get here? It's just because of the ground freezing and thawing, and as it did, things pop up. We found an old metal clock, and we found all sorts of weird things over the years, and it's just kind of neat. And we're seeing the same thing. This is material remains. And sometimes we will excavate an archaeological site using large equipment, like a backhoe or something, to get some of the dirt. But during that, some things that are fragile can become broken, or if they're already broken, that sometimes they break it a little more. And so we see that there's a lot that goes on through all of this. All right, so let me see. I'm just trying to talk and go. I'm looking at the time going, oh, I'm running out of time here. So one of the things that we study would be pottery. Pottery is a great source because we can actually date pottery fairly well. With carbon dating. And so we like to look at things that people used in their everyday life. So pottery would be something that would be used in their everyday life. Bowls, plates, jars that they would carry oil or water in and store their foods in. So some of them were used for religious beliefs. Some of them were for their daily living. Some of them were for mortuary practices. So the pharaohs, when they died, they would bury some of their vital organs. Okay. Then we have prehistoric archaeology, where we take a look at the writings of the past, things that we dig up, artifacts that will help us understand the lives, that maybe the beliefs of the people, the way they lived in their societies. Then there's proto-historic archaeology that deals with the culture in writing, and it combines the data with documentary sources. So it brings those two together. And then we have historic archaeology, which goes into like maps and other different types of records, so we can understand the past that way. So there's all sorts of different documents that we use. So when we take a look at the past, there's many different things that we look at. Like with archaeology, we're looking at all the different materials that we can find. And it helps us to reconstruct the lives of the people. Okay, so when we go to different cultures, we can look at archaeological remains, the different things that we find buried under the ground, the different writings, and we can put it together. We could see how people lived. We can take a look and we can preserve their culture heritage. And so we can take a look at different archaeological sites, and we can see how those groups of people lived in the past. And we can share those values with the people. So maybe the people in their area want to know more about their past. And it's fun to learn about your past, learn about your parents and your grandparents and your great grandparents and different things like that. So we're taking out these things. We can look at photographs as part of our historical past, but here we can go to different cultures and we can look at their different artifacts, and we can learn about their past. And we can actually understand human behavior a little bit more by looking at the past. So let's take a look at some things that we do know about ancient cities. Excuse me one second. We cover a lot of stuff in class. Today is just our first day of just going, whew, let's look at the behind things. So I end up losing my voice in all my classes because I'm just talking a mile a minute. If I go too fast, just tell me. So what we do know about ancient cities is a lot of them were built on hills. And what's really cool is we start digging underneath those hills, and we find other cities and other remnants of the past. And so what they did is they built their cities up on hills, not only for protection from their enemies, but during the summer you would get a cooler breeze up where it's hotter, and then you wouldn't have all the rains that would have flood areas, so they were higher up from heavy rains. And the more their city grew, the higher it grew. Okay, so they would build up on top of trash, so they'd bury their trash. When cities were destroyed, like think about like Jericho. I was just when the walls came down, they would bury those and they would build on top. Jerusalem, when it was destroyed, they buried that and built on top of that. So they would build on top of those cities, and so they would raise the floor level. There was my daughters went to Europe on a trip this summer, and they got to see some of the different cities like Ephesus, and they went to Greece and Rome. And some of these places, they said that the city had grown so tall that some of the buildings were actually like the second floor, like the door that would open was the second floor or the third floor, because the city had grown. So they couldn't use the door, the real door, which was down below. It was just kept growing up and up. And I thought, that is just what we learn in history. So I thought, oh, that is so cool. So they took some pictures for me. And I thought that was really kind of neat. Because they would build their cities on top of each other. And some of the cities would end up being abandoned when they were destroyed. So they would bury them, and the final hill would be called a tell. And so that's where the ancient ruins were. Okay, and so as the ruins were, like the wind and rain, it would erode everything, and so things would get buried and get overgrown. Okay. My driveway this summer, we were focused on building a deck, and so I didn't pay much attention to my driveway. I got a stone driveway, and over the summer, the grass and weeds have grown into my driveway. And I've been going over there and trying to spray them and pick the weeds. I try to pick them and pull them out instead of spray them. I don't like to use that, but I do use like vinegar and salt, and I'll put that on there and try to kill the plants. But it's completely overtaken one whole section where I had a sidewalk that went into my husband's garage, and it's completely overgrown. So within a couple years, you think about the streets would be overgrown with weeds and plants and everything else, and plants would start growing above them. And then as the leaves fall and they start to decay and rot, you would keep building up on that foundation. So you could see how easily those hills would be completely covered within a few years and be completely unnoticeable as a city. We can see how as they ran out of room, sometimes they would move their city to another place. And so they would leave that tell there, that final ancient city that was covered. And so as we dig down, we can actually see these ancient cities. So in the different strata, we can actually see the debris. And sometimes we use large equipment to dig them. And then some of the digging is done by hand and a little paintbrush. And they dig very carefully so they don't miss anything. And then they would label where everything is found, all the debris. And you can see right here, you can see the foundations of all these little squares and rectangles. Those are foundations for different buildings or walls or gardens. And you can see that all the debris that they have there that they're collecting, and they're figuring out what the city was, what they did, what the people did, and they're finding out the history of this group of people. And so we're finding different places all around the world where we're finding these ancient missing cities, hidden cities somewhere in the jungles, or, even in a desert or different places around the world. And they get buried very, very quickly. And one of the things, and because I'm a potterist, a ceramicist, a potter, I love pottery and I love the designs on them. I love ancient pottery. I love to collect pottery. When my daughter came back from one of my daughters, when she came back from Europe, she brought me an old oil lamp. and they said that it had to be, she bought it in an antique shop, and they think that it's a couple hundred years old. And I thought, how cool is that? And it looks perfect, just like the day it was made. And you can tell it's old by the different pottery that it's made out of and everything else. So pottery gives a big story. It tells you what the earth was made like. It tells you that, like a lot about the artist. It tells you what the function was. So yeah, that's really cool, isn't it? And so it's really kind of neat to be able to see that. So when it's found, we know that one thing, pottery does not rust or decay. So we can identify different time periods by the style of pottery and sometimes the designs that are on them. And so we can actually understand the people. And you can see these first 4 jars, those are conical jars. Those would be what was used to store like the organs of the pharaoh when the pharaoh died. Now, the inscriptions on them tell us a lot about them also. It tells us whether it's been owned by a king, because it would have LMLK on it and in their hieroglyphs, which would tell us that it belonged to a king. And then we could also see a little time period, a little clue into that time period. We've actually found a clay piece of pottery that had like a grocery list on it, which is so cool. Someone wrote their list of what they needed on a broken piece of pottery. And so it tells us a lot about the people and what they did in their life, which is so neat. And then there's also coins that they find, and their coins look a lot like what coins that we have today. They're stamped on the front and back, and sometimes they even have the dates written on them, or they have emblems of the pharaoh that they came from, the time period that they came from. And around 600 BC is about the time that coins started to become prevalent in society. So we see a time period where people were trading money for objects. So before then, they would do other things, they would make trades other ways. And so we see that coins became popular around this time. Okay. So we are at the end of class. Make sure that you keep up with assignments. We're going to go to our class here for just a minute. I wanted to show you a couple of things. Your homework is going to be due the night before class, so about midnight the night before. If you don't make it in that time period, some of you in different time zones, I'm not going to consider it late. It will say that it's closed, but you can still turn in work. Okay. So Jenna, you're in Hawaii. You still have till my time, midnight or so, to get your work in. It's not going to affect you. So just make sure that, you turn it in. If it says that it's closed, you can still turn your homework in. It just tells me that you turned it in late. If you're more than a week late, I start docking you points. So make sure that you get your work done on time as much as possible. If you can't for some reason, let's say you're going on vacation or you've had the flu or something, have your parents just send me an email and let me know. Okay. That way we get that done. And so that's kind of what I talked about there. So your homework for this week is to read chapter 1 in your archaeological book, and your questions are going to be on your class page. Next week, we're going to play a game at Kahoot, and we'll kind of go over some of the things that we talked about. But let's take just a moment. We've got just a moment here. Let's go to my screen and, oh, wrong thing. Here we go. Here's our class. Okay, so you notice that here it says contact Mrs. Filipek. You can contact me here. Don't do it right here, okay, at this button, because I won't get it, okay? And you can enter the classroom right here. Here's the different things that we need for our class. And you notice this was week 1. So week 1, we have our homework. This was due before class, but I know some of you just started class, just signed up. So make sure you get the discussion done. I'm not hard on that. And then sometimes our homework's going to be in several of the different books all at the same time. So make sure you know which book your homework is out of. And then this is where we read, you watch the video about the archaeological discoveries. And then here is a couple different other tips here. So you can watch those other videos if you want. They're not graded or anything, but that will give you an idea of what I am looking for there for homework. Okay, any questions?